Hello. As some of you guys may know, my name is Sam, and I have the title of my IG channel, my Instagram profile channel, and my handle, and also my YouTube channel is Kasama for Christ. That's on my YouTube. My website is kasamaforchrist.com. The Instagram is Kasama for Christ 2. Now, a couple things. This being Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month or History Month, I do want to stress a couple things about myself. I am a Christian, but I'm also a third generation Filipino American. Saying that, some people could laugh and say, you know, by the time the second, third generation, you're not even Filipino anymore. But I disagree. Everywhere I go, people ask me if I'm Filipino or another Asian group. So that being said, this being Asian American Pacific Islander History Month, I do want to stress to the fact that part of my testimony as a Christian is the fact that 27 years ago, I was not a Christian. I was practicing animistic beliefs, some would call almost a indigenous beliefs from the Philippines that came from my family, otherwise known as anting. And I would like to stress the fact is I no longer do that. I follow Jesus Christ, but at the same time I acknowledge my history and my past. One of the things I've noticed about Asian American Pacific Islander Month, AAPI Month, there's a lot of stress about pre-colonial times and the belief systems and the writings and the culture before the Spanish arrived to the Philippines, which is cool, which is all well and good. But at the same time, if for me personally, I had to distance myself from some aspects of my family history from the anting part, because of the fact is, somebody said a long time ago, it was a good man. He told me, you could love your culture, you could love your ideas. And this was a Chicano man. This was a Mexican American man. You could love your race, but you don't have to love everything about it. You don't have to love the superstitions. You don't have to love the witchcraft. You don't have to love. And I do believe that anting can be considered as witchcraft and superstition, totally against Christianity. If you give anything above Jesus, you're worshiping that as an idol, whether it be a statue, whether it be a piece of artwork, whether it be a tree, a river. I had to go when I was growing up. Like I said, as a third generation Filipino American, I consider myself third. Some people consider second because my grandmother came here when she was really young. She was in the 1920s, 1930s. She was a little girl, like 8-10 years old. So I'm like 2.5 generation, third generation Filipino American. But because of my upbringing, one thing about people don't recognize is the first generation immigrants that come here, generally, I'm just thinking generalities, what they do is that they learn to grind. They learn how to hustle and to make it in America by any means. Assimilation, learning the culture, learning how to chase that bag, to get a life for themselves, for their families. Second generation, sometimes there's a tendency to rebel against the cultural norms. And by that I mean my parents, both sides, my parents were full-blooded American citizens, where they had no real, they considered United States, Stockton, California, Fairfield, Sacramento, Central Valley as their home. They didn't consider the Philippines as their home. Both sets of parents, my mother's side and my father's side. In fact, my grandparents told both sets of parents, you're in America, you speak English. You want a good paying job. So 100 years later, what happens? You're in America, you want a good paying job, you speak Spanish. And it's a little, it sounds like a little joke, but it's actually true that to make it in this country, you got to adapt. And that's, so when it comes to the second generation, they assimilate. They want to be so Americanized. Sometimes they forget those aspects of their culture. And the reason why I'm going to this history is because that brings me back to the how I got involved with the superstitions and anting. Now, my grandmother had a lot of stories that she had spread from the Philippines to Hawaii to San Francisco to Stockton. We landed in Stockton pretty much 100 years ago, 1920s, 1930s. So what happens with that story is the fact is we came here holding on to those traditions, holding on to those superstitions. Some of them were just memories. By the time my mother's around, brought up Catholic home, mother and father Catholic home. So what we did was basically we're Catholic. But the thing is, my grandmother still had those beliefs and those superstitions that she passed on with the little amulets, with the prayers, the tattoos from my grandfather's side. All that stuff all intertwines with the anting. All intertwines with the superstitious beliefs, with the candles and all the different things that go along with Filipino witchcraft. I call it Filipino witchcraft. When I was practicing it, if someone told me it was Filipino witchcraft, I would get upset and be offended. But looking back at it now as a Christian, I see that it is rebellion against God, even if it's supposed to be supposedly white witchcraft or white supernatural influences. And by white, I mean like white magic versus black magic, not race. But I will tell you that when I got into my college years, growing up with a culture of this and that, and like Americanism versus, one thing about being Filipino American, there's a tendency to, people say you just want to be like, want to have black culture involved in your life. You want hip hop culture, you want ghetto culture, you want that, or you want to be more Mexican. And because growing up in the 90s as a Filipino American, you didn't really have that many role models that you could look up to that were Filipino or Filipino American. The things that you saw in the media were basically, you were the punchline in the joke, if you were mentioned at all, or you were the dog eater, or you were the lovable sidekick. You weren't represented. If we were represented as Asian, a generic Asian character in the media, the only three characters, and I call them the Trinity of Filipino American movie stars. You have Ernie Reyes Jr., you had Dante Bosco, Rufio, and you had the GOAT, Ludon Phillips. The only sad part about Ludon Phillips, he always was portrayed, even though he's half Filipino, half white, he was always portrayed as a Mexican American, a Chicano. He rarely, I don't think he had like maybe 2 roles where he played a Filipino American. And it took years for most people, most Filipinos to say, hey, he's one of us. But those were our Trinity. On these long tangents, let me go back to how I got involved with the anting. I met up with a bunch of people. I lived in San Francisco, and I met with a bunch of people that were very into Filipino, pro-Filipino American culture, for pro-Filipino, just everything. So when I got involved with that, I met other people, and those other people introduced me to other people. And from that, I learned various things about not just my culture in the United States, but also in pre-colonial, pre-Spanish information and knowledge. And on some of those qualities, like my former pastor used to say, you could love your culture, but you don't have to accept everything that's in your culture. And this was a Chicano guy. His name was Pastor Art Valenzuela. When he said that, it was very crucial to me to recognize and understand that I can love my culture. I can love aspects, but there are the people that introduced me. In fact, it was a weird situation because a lady that I tried to ask about the anting, the witchcraft, one of the ladies before I went to my family was a woman that basically was from the Philippines, that was that fought during the Marcos regime, and she did a lot of things. But the thing is, when I would ask her in San Francisco, I said, "Hey, can you teach me some stuff?" And she says, "I only teach women." And so I said, "Okay." So I kind of like, "Okay, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm doing." So I went up to my family and I would ask them, "How do you do this?" My mother would get upset. She said, "Don't do this. Don't do this. Don't do this." So I would do research and look in books and I would like study. And I said, "Okay, this is what I'm doing." So the thing is, when you do that stuff, it opens up portals, spiritual portals. And when they say that there's evil that lurks behind those portals, opening up places you're not supposed to open up, that's true. For 5 years, I was involved in it. And what happened to me was a lot of draining of my energy. I don't know how to explain it, my essence. That's, no, this is the end of part 1.